These are bootleg notes.
I wrote notes and then I'd get rid of them and rewrite them and have something completely different.
I know it's gonna shift.
It's just, I don't even know what I'm gonna say because it's like, it's so much that I can't get it together.
I just found out we had to do a written response. I think it was Tuesday or something like that.
Right.
And I was like, how are you going to
Okay.
email me some stuff? But I was like, if they're not going to say this, how do you know?
It's right next door.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
might
write
say
it.
different
You know what? I'm
things.
gonna
So I
write it
took
after the
some
fact.
notes and I just kind
Pretty
of
much.
figured I'd just, whatever.
Callaloo style. Come on. That's how we do.
That's
Girl,
what it is. Okay.
that is smart.
What?
You have a little kiosk.
You know.
It's so cute.
Okay, good morning. Good morning.
Exactly.
Welcome to Love Beyond Borders. I'm Alex Vasquez. So honored to be here on this incredible panel this morning. We have a lot on our agenda this morning, so I thought we would get straight to it. How the format is going to go is I'm going to introduce our two headliners. They're going to speak about 20 minutes each. Then we are going to open up the conversation to the respondents on the panel. I'll do their introductions when that time comes and open up for Q&A after that. So we have a lot of exciting things to look forward to this morning. First, I have the great honor of introducing our two key speakers, Nnedi Okorafor, a Nigerian-American author of 6 books of science fiction, fantasy, and speculative fiction, the most recent being Iridessa and the Secret of the Nevermind, Akata Witch, and Whose Fears Death. The Hurston Wright Literary Award, the Wole Soyinka Prize for Literature in Africa, the World Fantasy Award, Macmillan Writers Prize in Africa, and the Carl Brandon Parallax Award are some of the honors she has received for her fiction. A recipient of the PhD from the University of Illinois in Chicago, she teaches at Chicago State University. Please welcome our first speaker, Nnedi Okorafor.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, I'm going to talk about love in my work. What's interesting, what I submitted was really, it was an interview where I discussed love, the concept of love in my work. And getting my notes together, there's so many things, there's so much to talk about in this that I still came up with more. So what I'm gonna talk about is something that was not in the interview. Right now I'm working on a book called The Book of Phoenix. And when I was really started to think about where, just the significance of love in my work, I really started thinking about this new book that I'm writing. The Book of Phoenix it's about a woman, and she was grown in Tower 7. So this is science fiction. My work is science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction, everything in between. And Phoenix is a specimen. She's a scientific weapon that was created from African DNA. She was grown and raised within Tower 7, along with other specimens who are all predominantly of African descent. Now, a lot of these specimens, for example, are cyborgs, half human, half animal, a man who can walk through walls, another who can eat glass, and a woman with 3 breasts. That's just a small, so I don't know where I come up with this stuff, but it comes from somewhere. So Phoenix is an accelerated organism, which means that she's 1 year old, but she looks like she's 40. And now the story starts when something happens. First of all, she starts heating up, and think about it, she's near 40, and she's a phoenix, so you can see where this is going. So she's this weapon that's been created. Now, and also a little bit more is they call all of the scientists, the doctors and the nurses and the staff and the soldiers in the building the Big Eye. So that's kind of the setting of it. And so Phoenix, the story begins when you have all of this science fiction-y stuff, right? You have all of this setup, but the story only begins with love. It's when the man that she loves, who is capable of eating glass And basically, he can consume all the things that would be left behind if something were to happen to the world. If a nuclear holocaust were to happen, he can eat it and he can survive on it. But in the trade-off with that is that he can't eat normal food. So the story begins when, and all of these people are in this building. They have never left. Phoenix has never left this building. She's never been outside. She doesn't know what outside is. She sees it through her window, and that's her only idea of the outside world. And one day, this man, Saeed, who is also one of the specimen in this tower, he takes one of her apples and he takes it to her room. And then he eats it and he dies. And so there's this whole, she sees this and she's thrown into complete turmoil because someone that she loves, this man that she is deeply in love with, kills himself. And so that is the catalyst for her to start seeking her own freedom, because she figures if he leaves, if he doesn't want to be here, then she doesn't want to be there. So that's the first time where she actually considers going outside and seeking her freedom. And when she seeks her freedom, and eventually when she seeks her freedom, that need to get out becomes a need for revenge for the death of her lover. And then that need for revenge for the death of her lover turns into a need for revenge for those who are like her, all the people that are in Tower 7. And mind you, this is set in the near future. So once again, the catalyst and the center and the focus of the story really is love, even though it is a science fiction story, and much of science fiction tends to be plot-driven as opposed to character-driven, and this is from a different perspective. What I discussed in my interview, however, was my novel, Who Fears Death, which is my third novel, and Who Fears Death was special to me for many reasons. Once again, it's science fiction, fantasy, kind of combined together, and it deals with a lot of really tough, difficult issues. The main character, for example, she is a product of what I call Sudanese Janjaweed-style weaponized rape, if that even makes sense. It does, but it's a real thing. The catalyst for writing her character was after reading a Washington Post article where they discussed weaponized rape. Weaponized rape is when one group of people seeks to annihilate another group of people by raping the women and impregnating them with their own. And so within an African or Middle Eastern culture, the child is considered, in general, I'm speaking of Africa as general, I'm fully aware of that, it's a big place. The child is considered the child of the man. So these men who are going and doing that and producing children in this way are destroying families from the inside. So when I read this in the Washington Post, this was happening in the Sudan, I saw it as the most evil, ingenious form of genetic warfare. So that was the catalyst for my main character in Who Fears Death. She ends up going across the desert. So Who Fears Death is set in the future. The main character, Onyesomu, ends up crossing the desert in pursuit of revenge against her father. The story deals with female circumcision, child soldiers, genocide, and of course, death. But for me, when I wrote this novel, and this novel was very, very difficult to write because it draws on a lot of historical and cultural things that are from my own culture. I'm Nigerian. I've always seen Who Fears Death as a love story, which is kind of interesting because it deals with all of these heavy issues, but at the core, at the root of the narrative is the love story. In the story, Onyesomu's companion, Muita, Onyesomu is a half-caste, so she's a product of one man from one group of people raping a woman from another group of people, and she's the product of that. And so she's an outcast in many ways, and completely actually. She's an outcast within both groups of people. She's not accepted within either group. Her mother takes her to live with her own people, and so she's treated basically like an untouchable within that group of people. Okay, so in the story, Onyesomu, her companion, also is like that, but he comes from where she came from, a union of violence. Muita comes from a union of love. Okay, so they're from two different. They're both outcasts and they're both half castes, but they're two different types. And And so both of them go on to have magical abilities, and Muita has his own story. Their love is so strong, however, that the fear of whether they'll stay together or not is not even a conflict in the story. It is assumed. It is consistent. And Onisomo is very, very powerful, but she loves him and she needs him. I wanted to portray a main character, a powerful female main character who is capable of loving and surrendering and submitting to that love at the same time, pursuing her goal. And he ends up going with her, and he pursues his own goal too. This was important to me because it's my vision of what I consider to be African love. Who Fears Death is not a romance. This is an epic story of Nigerian sorcery, cultural conflicts, and technology. And the story, hold on a minute, there we go. But the story would not happen without this strong love, and that love fuels the story. As a storyteller, I've always believed that without a love story, there is no story, whether you're writing science fiction or whether you're writing literary mainstream fiction. There is no story without a love story. I'm not saying that everything needs to be romance. No, I'm saying that love is something that I think drives a story, or that makes a story, that adds importance to a story. Nevertheless, the love that I'm most interested in and most interested in writing about is African love, and I believe that this is a type of love that is wrapped in conflict, it's wrapped, conflicted, and bonded with customs, traditions, and culture. And this is something that I wanted to write about. And the reason is because I look at my own family and I see this. I never saw my parents kiss. I can say from all my life, I never saw my parents kiss once. I'm sure that they did. And I have 3 siblings, so there are 4 of us, so yeah, I'm pretty sure that they did. But the showing of affection, especially kissing, was not something that was accepted around children. At least that was my own experience of my parents and the Nigerians of their generation. Yet and still, at the very end of my father's life, he passed in 2004, when he was very sick with Parkinson's and congestive heart failure. The irony is my father was a heart surgeon, so he died of shaking hands and congestive heart failure. That was also a big catalyst for Who Fears Death. But when he was at his sickest, when he was being flown in a helicopter from the suburbs to the University of Chicago hospital, a paramedic saw my mother with him and kind of observed them together, and he started crying. And I remember my sister asked him why was he crying, and he said that it was because he had never seen such a powerful love between husband and wife, never in his life. And so these are the parents whom I never saw kiss. And this man can take one look at them and he could see what existed between them. I wanted to capture this complexity in my stories. One of the most obvious examples in my story, in Who Fears Death, about me trying to, grasp this concept, this African concept, Nigerian concept, whatever you want to call it, was the concept of ifunanya in Who Fears Death. Maybe I'll do this. Yeah, maybe I'll read this. Okay. I want to read just a tiny bit, like 2 paragraphs, where the concept is illustrated. The part that I'm going to read this is when Onyesomu decides to seek revenge against her father, and she's crossing the desert with her group of friends to do that. They've hit the road, in other words. It's a very hero's journey-esque story. They've just left a town where the men there viewed half-caste women like Onyesomu as prostitutes. And when she refuses to service them, they attempted to rape her, and she escaped, but not without emotional scarring. And this is what her lover, Muita, says to lift her up. And this is in first person, this is in Onyesomu's voice. I opened my mouth and inhaled his breath. He kissed me again, and quietly, carefully, softly, he spoke the words that few women ever hear from a man, ifunanya. They're ancient words. They don't exist amongst any other group of people. There is no direct translation in Nuru, English, Sipo, or Va. This word only has meaning when spoken by a man to one he loves. A woman can't use the word unless she is barren. It is not juju, not in the way that I know it, but the word has strength. It's wholly binding and it is true, and the emotion reciprocated. And if it is true, it is wholly binding if it is true and the emotion is reciprocated. This is not the word love. A man can tell a woman he loves her every day. Ifunanya is spoken only once in a man's life. Ifu means to look into, na means the, and anya means eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul. So this word is an actual word. Ifunanya is an Igbo word. Both of my parents are Igbo, so I'm Igbo. And it means to look into the eyes. It is a word that is used, the word for love. When someone asks, what is the Igbo word for love? People will say Ifunanya. But there is no word for the more Western concept of love. There is no word in the Igbo language for love. You know, that thing that exists between two people when they fall in love. That idea of falling in love and then getting married. That doesn't exist in the Igbo language. Ifunanya is a word that is how would I describe it? It doesn't mean to be in love. It means to look into the eyes. And it comes from the concept of, in traditional Igbo culture, couples they didn't meet, fall in love, and then get married. The marriages were arranged. And oftentimes, the two people didn't know each other, and when they were married, that would be the first time that they're meeting. And so when couples came together and were married, they were not necessarily in love. The love would develop over time as they got to know each other, went through trials and tribulations together, and et cetera, and had children, et cetera. So eventually, so Ifunanya is referring to that kind of love, a love that grows over time as opposed to something that you feel due to physical or chemistry or whatever people, the way people do, what the Western idea of love. So I wanted to really portray that with this idea. And so in Who Fears Death, Ifunanya, I took the idea of Ifunanya and I tweaked it. I gave it more of a science fiction. I added magic to it, first of all. Not as she says, not magic from like in the juju sense that most people are referring to. It's something that can only be spoken once. It's something that can only be said when it's reciprocated, and it's something that can only be said by men. So I kind of was mixing two different things here. That the whole patriarchal side of it, you know, because Ifunanya in Who Fears Death is an African, and specifically African concept. So, and I added the patriarchy to it because, you know, a lot of African cultures are highly patriarchal. So only men can speak it. And then I added a little feminist tweak to it, and then it said, oh yeah, and also, barren women can say it too. You have to be barren to say it. So I was purposely complicating the matter. So these are ways that you can do that in science fiction. You can enter conversations with concepts through the actual story, and that's what I love about science fiction. So the concept of Ifunanya in Who Fears Death is in conversation with the Western idea of love, the African idea of love, and the patriarchal side of it too. And so that's just one example of where I'm kind of I'm trying to show the African idea of love. And okay, good. I don't want to go on too long. Let me see. I think those are the main things that I want to touch on, because I can go on. I think this is just one example of where I'm doing this, because I do this in many different ways. Even in this one particular novel, where I'm looking at the concept of love and the concept of African love amongst both it's set in the future, but of course, it's definitely linked to our present times. So I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We're always so grateful to have a Greg Tate occasion. Greg Tate is currently a visiting professor in the Department of Africana Studies at Brown. From 1981 to 2005, he wrote for The Village Voice and also wrote for Vibe magazine from 94 to 2003. He is author of five boys. 5 books. Flyboy and the Buttermilk, Essays on Contemporary America, Brooklyn Kings, New York City's Black Bikers, Midnight Lightning, Jimi Hendrix and the Black Experience, Flyboy 2, The Greg Tate Reader, Writings from 81 to 2001, and James Brown's Body and the Revolution of the Mind, which is forthcoming. We're all looking forward to that, in 2013. He is also editor of Everything But the Burden, What White People Are Taking from Black Culture. So warm welcome to Greg Tate.
Glad to be here. Charles, thank you for the invitation and for the, I would say, overly generous publication of interview in the most recent issue of Callaloo. And also like to say, I think you're something of a genius at social experimentation in convening this conference of unlikely suspects to talk about a subject as prone to sentimentality as love. It reminds me of something Miles Davis said about the creation of Bitches Brew. He said, the only way you get anything new happening in music is you take the best musicians you can find and you make them play above what they know, beyond what they know. I said, okay, yeah. Because everybody here is as brilliant as they are, totally got put on the spot by having to address this topic. So I look at this as your bitch's brew. So because Miles also told his musicians in the session, he said, yeah, the music is like the brewing, like we're like the bitches in there stirring it up. All right. So I want to read from what I thought were the two, or draw from the two most meaningful things I thought I'd ever written about the subject of love in my own work. They're actually from 2 dramatic pieces. They're short excerpts. The first one is from a play called My Darling Gremlin, which was first performed in 1993 at Aaron Davis Hall at City University, and later at the Kitchen 2 years later. And it's about 3 friends who are biking across America on a bicycle built for 3 from Oakland, from the Bay Area. And the 3 friends are Vergerie, who runs a counseling center for pregnant teenage moms or mothers-to-be, moms and mothers-to-be. And Sebastian, who I describe as a kind of Afrocentric New Age healer. And Mr. Danny Love, who is a lounge singer. And they've taken this trip because of their great love for Mr. Danny Love, who you find out is dying of an unspecified illness, is been diagnosed as being terminal, and they've decided this is going to be a last kind of hurrah road trip for their friendship. And because I'm somebody who tries not to go anywhere without a band, even if I have to create it on the spot, I have drawn into service to help read these works. First, for My Darling Gremlin, Ifa Baeza, and Daphne Brooks. Okay. Who will read as, no, that's wrong. Let's say, okay, Daphne will read as Vergerie, the sister who runs the teen counseling center, and Sebastian and Ifa will read as Sebastian. and I will be Mr. Danny Love. And in my mind, I have the humbling task of reading as this character that was so magnificently brought to stage by a friend who's now deceased, Philip Hamilton. And the play is set in an abandoned nuclear testing site in Lovelock, Nevada, September 18th, 2019. And Mr. Danny Love is, and all of them, their bike breaks down basically at this testing site. And so they just begin to have conversation while they figure out how they're going to continue on with the journey. But in fact, the journey is not meant to be continued on beyond this point, but only some of them know that. And it's at the lip of a nuclear bomb crater. I love looking into the abyss. I love it even more when the abyss winks back, giving you more love and more joy than age or time can ever destroy. My love will be so true, take about 100 lifetimes to wear it down, tear it down. My. What a majestic monument to man's powers of destruction. I once knew a boy whose face looked like that. One very tragic case of acne. We used to call him Jabba the Pit. Isn't it funny how being a victim doesn't render any of us incapable of being a victimizer? On the contrary, being a victim often makes us pine for some poor soul we can terrorize into unconditional love. I remember how my father reacted when he recognized that all 3 of his sons had grown up to be homosexual men. He didn't reject us, of course. No, he took it out on our mother, not in some crude physical manner. That wasn't his style. But the psychological torture he devised was so exquisitely malevolent. From that day on, he was only affectionate towards her when they were out in public among friends. At home, he became a wall of indifference. You don't know how much my mother loved to talk to that man. When we were growing up, the house resounded with the sound of their voices. They talk about opera, film, literature, faculty rows, family gossip, you name it. At night, we'd sit up in our beds and listen to them go on for hours, sharing their minds with one another. Daddy knew what he was denying her. More than his attention, it was the pleasure she derived from seeing herself reflected in his mind. I know how much that hurt her. We still talk about it, my brothers and I. And we wonder if he ever realized how much he hurt himself, losing access to her mind and her music. What a fool. Thought he was poisoning her when he was really poisoning himself. Poisoning the same air he had to breathe, same as everybody else. How do you stop loving someone after 35 years?
Only men can do that. Stop loving somebody just because they're not in love with them anymore. Women are cursed when it comes to love. We can leave them, but we can never stop loving them. Not the ones we really love, not even the ones we think we would be better off dead.
In my case, especially those.
Like, you ever see an ex of yours with his new piece, and they're doing all the things for them they could never get it together to do for you? You could kill them, right?
I know that song. That's called Love Rearing Its Ugly Head.
Now, is that love talking or is that your ego talking?
Honey, that is the sound of love unloading a Tech-9 clip on your ego at point-blank range. Last time it happened to me, I was like Daryl Hannah's death scene in Blade Runner. It was not pretty, and it was not cute.
Love will treat you like a faucet, turn you off and on. When you think your love is right there, baby, it's up and gone. So at this point in the play, Mr. Danny Love goes into a reverie, a monologue, a soliloquy, to a character that's described as a virtual dreadlock guitar man, and only he can see him. So you have to imagine the scene of the 3 of them, the broken bicycle, the bomb crater, and he begins speaking to this virtual character, who is an embodiment of something for him, but I think that'll come out in the text. You know, there's a few things I want you to know about me, lover, before this gets too deep. This might come as a shock, but I used to walk on the wild side. I was out there searching for a love just like ours and never found it because, hey, it wasn't ours. There's been an ocean of lovers between the tides of me and the shores of you. I know you wonder about my other lovers, wonder how you compare to them, and not only the ones I've told you about. Well, some were fascinating and cute, but they never smelled as good as you, baby. Ornette Coleman once said to me, have you ever smelled the music? There were others I haven't told you about, but see, I didn't fuck them all. It's not like I was promiscuous. I am a big flirt, but not a slut, you know? Truth is, I was always more in love with being in love than with love itself, you know what I mean? I knew that you would. What's the point of life if you don't flirt with a little romance? Are you jealous, lover? Are you the jealous type? No reason you have to be. You being so seductive and all, I'm not the jealous type either. I'd probably be jealous if I saw you with some artsy, craftsy boy. You've got nothing to fear, though, because, love it damn, you scampered down my secret cubby hole and taken up permanent residence there. You're closer to my heart than anyone's ever been. You know where my inner song dwells. You know just how I think music should taste on a man's breath. You know the winding path I want to see it take up his hungry nostrils. Jimmy just wanted to fill you up. How did he put it? Music, sweet music, I wish I could caress you with my fingertips. Jimmy never smelled you, though, did he? I like to be the first. But who knows? Maybe he beat me there, too. Maybe on the eve of his death, the muse took on fleshy scent, too. Oh, fuck death. I've got a lot of life left in me yet. When we took this trip, I wasn't looking to find love again by any stretch of the imagination. Not this kind of love, anyway, so deep and abiding. I know my girls love me, and I know they'd never abandon me to my fear of dying alone. But now I've got to abandon them, lover, leave them behind to accept your sweet embrace. You came along with your siren song, and you tempted me to madness. You came along and rescued me. I know the girls will probably try and lay a guilt trip on me. They're going to be so mad with me, I know it. But if they truly love me, they'll be as ecstatic as I am, if they love me madly. And if not, well, they'll just have to get over themselves and understand our love, my new love that dare not speak its name, my melodious and odoriferous virtual love. Okay. So, thank you. Now, let me read from a short segment from a second piece, which is called The AECM versus the Revolutionary Chicken. And it's actually dialogue. The dialogue is actually taken from two speeches, one by Malcolm X, one by Martin Luther King. Martin's speech is the speech where he talks about the need for creative maladjustment, and the Malcolm speech is the ballots or the bullets. So what I've done is combined, given those two speeches, women characters, two women friends, to have with one another as a girlfriend conversation. And I've also invited Regine.
Wait, we're trying to.
Yes. Thank you, Regine. Yes. Oh.
Because they're not numbered and they shuffle. Just make sure. I think
Okay.
this is right.
Okay. Oh, let's see. Yes. Okay. No, I know what happened.
You want us to start this?
Yeah, we can. Okay. Just yeah, there you go. All right. Aoife's going to be Malia 2X, and Regine is going to be Martine Luther Queen.
The queen. If you don't take an uncompromising stand, I don't mean go out and get violent.
At the same time, you should never be nonviolent.
Unless you run into some nonviolence.
I'm nonviolent with those who are nonviolent with me. But if you drop that violence on me,
Then you've got to make me go insane, and I'm not responsible for what I do.
Now you're facing a situation where the young Negroes coming up
They don't want to hear that turn the other cheek stuff, no.
in Jacksonville, those were teenagers. They were throwing Molotov cocktails.
Negroes have never done that before.
I must say, this is concerning the great controversy
Over rifles and shotguns?
over rifles and shotguns. The only thing I've ever said is that in areas where the government has proven itself either unwilling or unable to defend the lives and property of Negroes, then it's
Time for Negroes to defend themselves. Article number 2 of the Constitutional Amendments provides you and me the right to own a rifle or a shotgun. It's constitutionally legal to own a shotgun or a rifle.
This doesn't mean you're going to get a rifle and form battalions and go out looking for white folk.
Although you'd be within your rights, I mean, you'd be justified, but what would be illegal?
And we don't do anything illegal. How in the world can you love such people?
Well, let me rush on to say that when I speak of love, I'm not talking about some emotional bosh. I think in so many instances, the whole idea is misunderstood.
It is absurd to urge oppressed people to love their oppressors in an affectionate sense.
There are certain things in our nation and in the world which I am proud to be maladjusted to. I say very honestly that I never intended to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism, to the self-defeating effects of physical violence either.
So you let your dying be reciprocal.
This is what she means by equality.
What is good for the goose is good for the gander.
The Greek language talks about philia.
The sort of intimate affection between personal friends. This is significant love.
And on this level, you love people that you like, people that you have dealings with.
People that are friends, this is friendship.
Then the Greek language comes out with the word agape.
Agape is more than romantic or aesthetic love. Agape is more than friendship.
Agape is creative, understanding, redemptive goodwill for all men.
It is an overflowing love that seeks nothing in return.
Theologians would say that this is the God of love operating in the human heart. When one rises to love on this level, one loves every man.
When one rises to love on this level,
she
loves every man.
She rises to the point of loving the person who does the evil deed. Loving the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does. Yes, 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 I believe that this is the kind of love that can carry us through.
That can carry us through this period.
Carry us through this period of transition. Yes, Malia.
Malia. Martine, you're trying to blind yourself to the historic development, everything that's taking place on this earth today. You'll see other things. Why will you see them? Because it's impossible for a chicken to produce a duck egg, even though they both belong to the same family of fowl. A chicken just doesn't have it within its system to produce a duck egg. And if ever a chicken did produce a duck egg, I'm certain you would say it is certainly a revolutionary chicken.
Ha! I know you would say it was a revolutionary chicken. But my faith is that somehow this problem will be solved. I am convinced that now there is a need for a new organization in our world. The International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment. Men and women who will be as maladjusted. Men and women who will be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos. Men and women who will be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos. Men and women who will be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos. And when you see them coming up with that kind of conspiracy, let them know your eyes are open. And let them know you got something else that's wide open too. And when you see them coming up with that kind of conspiracy, let them know your eyes are open. And let them know you got something else that's wide open too. And when you see them coming up with that kind of conspiracy, let them know your eyes are open. And let them know you got something else that's wide open too. And when you see them coming up with that kind of conspiracy, let them know your eyes are open. And let them know you got something else that's wide open too.
Awesome. Thank you, Aoife, Regine, Daphne. That was the hottest cold reading I've ever heard. Thank you, say. Thank you.
Wonderful, wow. Okay, so, next. Our respondent, we have, let's see, I'm sorry, uno, dos. Sorry. Exactly. We have 5 respondents on the panel, 3 of which have short formal responses, and 2 of which are going to help enliven the creative space of our Q&A. So the first speaker is going to be Gregory Jerome Hampton, who received his PhD in comparative lit from Duke. He has published articles in the English Journal, the CLAJ, Children's Literature and Education, Obsidian 3, and Callaloo. His most recent courses have been invested in the problematic of the Black body and its portrayal in both literature and film, as well as literature across cultures, African, British, Native American, Caribbean, and Asian. His book, Changing Bodies in the Fiction of Octavia Butler, Slaves, Aliens, and Vampires, is the first monograph of literary criticism invested in examining the complete body of fiction produced by Octavia Butler. Other fields of interest include 19th and 20th century American and African American literature, as well as gender studies. Warm welcome to Professor Hampton.
Danny Love makes a reference, or he made a reference to the Miracles. Miracles were a group founded in 1955 in Detroit, Michigan, under the name of the Five Chimes. The song that he references is More Love. It was recorded in 1967 by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, one of Motown's most famous groups. The song More Love was one of Robinson's most personal compositions. He wrote it for his wife, Claudette Roger Robinson, who stopped touring with the Miracles in 1964 after a series of 8 miscarriages. He made a quote about the song and why he wrote it. Quote, after she had a miscarriage, Claudette would always tell me she was sorry she had let me down. I would explain that she had not let me down because she was there. She was alive. I wanted the babies, but I didn't know them. I wrote More Love to let her know how I felt about her, end quote. Loss is relative, and despite the pain it may cause, it also tends to be very subjective in nature. Smokey and Claudette Robinson lost 8 children to miscarriages. Mr. Danny Love Sr. lost 3 sons to homosexuality. As a result, one man writes a song to honor the life of his wife, while another man chooses to use silence as a form of psychological torture against his wife. Silence is a powerful weapon in the war of love. But as Danny Love suggests, the oppressor must lower himself into the abyss of every act of oppression he inflicts. Love is blurry, and it blurs the vision of those in love. Love does not exist squarely in the realm of the real. How can it? Dr. Okorafor describes love as being very hybrid in nature. I'm in agreement with this assessment. Love is chthonic, existing in a space that transcends Western and Platonic thought. Love is several things at once. Love is joyous, love is painful. We nurture those we love, we hurt those we love. Love confuses and love clarifies. Consequently, love is necessarily the ingredient for any truly good story. Love is Eshu, Elegba, Nancy, Brer Rabbit, Kokopelli, Loki, Nike, and Hermes all rolled into one. Love is a trickster character that makes a story worth telling and the journey worth completing. Love is forever changing and always laughing at those who have been afflicted by its tenuous existence. Toni Morrison reminds us through Sula and Eva Peace, as well as through Setha and Beloved, that love is dangerous and can only be considered safe when it is tethered upon the pages of a book. Dr. Okorafor's description of the love story in her novel, Who Fears Death, is vaguely reminiscent of the love story told in Octavia Butler's Wild Seed novel. The love between Anyanu and Adoro is not rooted in romance and does not come easily. Like the two characters in Okorafor's novel, Doro and Anyanu are destined for one another despite themselves. In many respects, they are opposite sides of the same coin. At times, it is difficult to define their relationship as love or loving because, and despite the fact that they constantly attempt to hurt, control, and to change one another. Butler would say, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The borders of love and hate are crossed often because love is a borderless space that necessitates pain and pleasure as a constant state of being. Love is dangerous because it makes mortals susceptible to various states of delusion. Only when a person accepts the notion that love is a boundless and inconsistent frontier will they be truly prepared to embark upon and enjoy the stories of love despite its genres.
Thank you. Our next respondent is Imani Perry, and I'm so sad to report that she's not able to make it today. Professor Perry, beloved presence here at Princeton, is an interdisciplinary scholar who studies race and African American culture using the tools provided by various disciplines, including law, literary and cultural studies, music, and the social sciences. She has published numerous articles in areas of those fields, many of which are available for download at imaniperry.typepad.com. She also wrote the notes and introductions to the Barnes & Nobles, as my family, as my family calls it, classics editions of the Narrative of Sojourner Truth. Professor Perry teaches interdisciplinary courses that train students to use multiple methodologies to investigate African American experience and culture. And Professor Perry sent her remarks, and they're short, and I'm going to do my best. I cannot even begin to approximate the incredible technique of the cold readings that we just heard, but I will certainly give it a try. I'll try, okay. This is Professor Perry's words. Quote, "Let me begin by offering my apologies for not being there, but I am there in spirit. Greg and Nettie are both writers whose work I am inspired and compelled by, so I appreciate this opportunity to offer a modest response. When I was 13, we listened to the song Computer Love in all the cities I had a home in, Birmingham, Chicago, and Cambridge. Shirley Murdoch wailed, Charlie Wilson seduced, and Roger Troutman's homemade voice box prophesied the digital courtship of today. Who knows this song? Mm-hmm. Can we get the chorus, the shooby-dooby-doo-bop? One more time. Beautiful. Thank you. Always collaborative work here at the Callaloo Conference. In her fiction, Nedi makes magic of a traditional kinds of Igbo love, ifunanya. Ifunanya, no? Yeah. Speculative fiction, by definition, remakes and remixes and therefore allows that kind of thing. And undoubtedly part of the speculation is that this art might not be so much stretching the truth, but telling it figuratively and outside of bounds, and therefore perhaps better. She reminds us of this in the piece. Science fiction is very much the stuff of our daily worlds, remixed and rewoven. Homemade love is thick. It isn't quaint at all. It is vast. The daddy in the first portion of Greg's love story descends, bitter at the realized possibilities of expansive love in his sons. The parental chatter talking about opera, literature, film, the mundane and the grand, according to the father, has opened up too much heart in the home created with his wife. He has sons who are gay and he knows it, so daddy makes silence fall. Only men can do that, she says. Stop loving someone when you are no longer in love. Love is walking with the ever-present prospect of quicksand sucking everything you know, turning your world inside out. A risky proposition filled with losses as well as gains. The stories about it are like so many homemade voice boxes. They cannot explain it by simply telling it to you straight. That intoxication, the dopamine, the devastation, demand something more by way of explanation. And so we turn to speculation, poetry, music assemblage from everything we got for an answer, moving past logic into the frightening possibility. Just something she sent along this morning. Beautiful, beautiful work. Thank you, Professor Perry in absentia. And for our final formal respondent, I don't have the occasion of saying this often, but it is with great excitement and a little bit of relief, quite truthfully, that I can say that Quisqueya is in the house here at Princeton. So Nelly Rosario is an assistant professor of English at, Texas State University of San Marcos. Rosario, a writer of fiction and nonfiction, was born in the DR and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She received, and this is something I often tell my students and they get very excited by. She got her BA in engineering from MIT and then an MFA from Columbia University. She has received numerous awards, including a '99 Barbara Deming Memorial Fund Fellowship, the Bronx Writers Center Van Leer Literary Fellowship for '99-2000, 2 National Arts Club Writing Fellowships, the '97 Hurston Wright Award in Fiction, and the '88 National Teachers in English Writing Award. She was named Writer on the Verge by the Village Voice Literary Supplement in 2001. Her debut novel, Song of the Water Saints, which traces the lives of 3 generations of Dominican women, won a PEN Open Book Award in 2002. She's currently at work on her second novel. And Rosario has much to teach us of not only love beyond the borders, but as love happening on the difficult and everyday love that happens on borders themselves. So welcome, Professor Rosario.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. Thank you so much, Alexandra. I just want to thank everyone. It's just amazing to me the act of love that it's taken for everyone to sort of converge here. And also the kind of continuation, sort of seeing this whole trajectory since New Orleans, Ethiopia, St. Louis, and just sort of how the conversation evolves. And so one of the things about love that I'm really struck by in this conference is this idea of everyone here who's presented and everyone who, we all bring this incredible love of the craft, whatever it is we do. And I think that's also worth talking about, not just love of people, but also love of ideas, love of thought. The fact that working, and there's agape, there's eros, there's philos, and just working and doing what we love to do, right? And engaging the art, engaging the work, the academic work, or whatever it is we do. And I really like this idea, yesterday Heli Jarima said something about how the genomic story in Black bodies, our sort of biological need to read and write and tell our stories. And I sort of like to think about sort of the way this manifests scientifically, but how it also trumps science. So there's this kind of, it's still a weird movement, and I'm gonna put it out there, But this whole idea of literary Darwinism, this sort of idea that we inherit many of predispositions we deem to be cultural through our genes. Like, it's almost like narrative is encoded in our DNA. And I find that really fascinating, and I believe it because you tell any 5-year-old, come here, I'm gonna tell you a story. And they run to you, right? We as children, we all love stories. Why do we love stories? Why do we love song? And for me, there is a kind of biological love of pattern, right? Stories have pattern, and we learn through patterns. It's the first thing kids do is try to figure out what the patterns are. So I'm really fascinated by this concept, how stories make us more adaptive and capable of passing on our own genes. This is sort of the kind of work we're doing, documenting and moving forward with our work. All right, so in my case, in terms of the kind of work I'm doing, the kind of work I see Neddy doing and Greg, and so many people who are interested in science fiction, I love, Greg, what you said in the, by the way, this is such an amazing interview in the last issue of Callaloo. The idea that science fiction is the dialectic between the dystopic and the utopic. What do we want? Where are we in this sort of gradient? What do we imagine for ourselves, for our futures? And you also talked about, Greg, the existential Black condition is very future-leaning. And it's true. People, I think Junot Diaz says, yeah, of course we're futuristic. I mean, you go from, let's say you're an immigrant, you go from, living in conditions where you might not have access to potable water, and then all of a sudden you're on an airplane and you're in New York City and you have a TV and you have toilet flushes. I mean, that's time travel, and he talks a lot about the fact that we are not strangers to this idea of the future in science fiction. So I really want to explore that as a writer. I do want to think about the future, just the way I was raised as a child of immigrants, el futuro. My father was always saying, el futuro, la educación es el futuro. So that we were always thinking about the future. It was never about now. It's like saving, constantly saving. And I was like, when is the future gonna come? When is it happening? And then all of a sudden I'm like 40. And here I am. So yes, we are future thinking. So I wanted, Maza, last year we did the translations panel. We were talking about how do we write love in a world that sort of rewards Black pain, right? So the New Yorker will publish our pain. We will be awarded prizes if we write blood and how fucked up we are as our condition, right? So that's what I'm trying to tackle in my fiction. Like, how do I write light? How do I write towards light? If love is light, right? And I like to think of love as light. I think J.T. Jenkins actually said it the first panel. Love is the oldest technology. There's electricity in love. There's light in love. When you're in love, I mean, after sex, the next day you have like your eyes are like shooting out, there's light. And when we talk about love, there's been a lot of talk of the eye, right? The ocular. We talk about, I think Jerima said something about his father loving his mother with his third eye, right? And, okay, I can't sing. I think I'm the only Dominican who can't sing, but let them know your eyes are wide open, right? Let them know your eye is wide open. So that's led me, like in my own work, to really think anatomically about the eye itself, like anatomically, like what is the eye? It's an organ that lets in and sort of processes light, what we see. And I like to think of the eye not as sort of the evil eye, and we talk a lot about, ahojamiento, evil eye, but it is a powerful organ. In fact, it confused Darwin with his theory of, I think the creationists argue that was the one organ that stumped his theory of evolution. Of course, I mean, Darwin kind of found his way out of it. If you read further, you realize he kind of works his way out of it. But for Darwin, the mystery of the eye evolution had to do, he confessed that it was absurd to propose that the human eye evolved through spontaneous mutation and natural selection. It's such a complex organ. So we have not yet, within medicine, figured out how to transplant a complete eye. You know, we can do corneal transplant, but not the whole eye. And so that's what I'm trying to imagine in my fiction. What if we can do that? Can we see through each other's eyes? Should we be able to make this transfer? I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't have a medical degree, but I am using Dr. Ramon Castroviejo, who was the one who invented or worked on a surgical technique for corneal transplant. And we'll see. I mean, that's what fiction is. Fiction allows you to sort of imagine and play with what the impossible, make possible the impossible. So I want to continue this sort of eye talk. I know by the time I'm done, you're going to be blinking and your eyes are going to be all watery. But so coming back to Nedi's Ifunanya, again, love, to look in the eye. You know, this is when you know, and I love being in Ethiopia. I kept telling Dagmawi and Maza, oh my God, everyone has biblical eyes here. It's like, you know Ethiopians by their eyes. I mean, you just know, you're like that Ethiopian. And there's something to that. The fact that that's sort of the cradle of humanity, I don't know, that was just, I had a whole bunch of, you know, ocular situations in Ethiopia. And then yesterday I was talking to Sarah Lewis, and she was talking about this concept of ocular fire, which I Googled it afterwards, I still couldn't find it. So I'm gonna figure out what this ocular fire is. But it's this idea that there was, in the past, the thought that the eye emitted light. And in fact, if you look at some old, you know, some of the Greek drawings or drawings, and you always see a sort of beam coming out of the eye. And then, of course, modern science tells us that really it's the other way around. The flux of light is this way. And so what Sarah was talking about, this idea of ocular fire, is the bridge we connect, that sort of light bridge we connect when we process an object, whatever it is we're seeing, right? That there is a connection, a bridge. So there's some things that I won't see, but there are things I'm gonna see, right? Depending on what my eye structure or sort of visual, what's going on with my own sight. And so I'm always asking people, so what's your sight? Like, what's your vision? The difference between sight and vision, right? What you can see with the eye and when you can see with your whole body is very different. So I talk to people I've talked to some of my colleagues, one of them who didn't get into the military because he was deemed colorblind. And he's from the border, he's Chicano, and he argues that he is not colorblind because he is able to perceive shades of red that are beyond what anyone else can see because he says sight is cultural, the idea of vision is cultural. Yeah, he may not be able to make out the gradient of blues and greens, but he is very versed in reds, and he will show you every gradation of red that we might be blind to. So that's really fascinating to me, and I really I'm trying to figure out how to bring it down in fiction. How do I bring all these ideas to the ground? And so I'm just gonna read a quick piece just so you get an idea of how I'm trying to do this with the eye thing, and then I'll be done. So, am I good on time?
Great, go ahead.
Okay, I don't want a little paper a little spitball of paper to come my way. Okay. All right, so this guy, his name is Milton, and it's just really quick, but I just want you to get an idea of a voice. I'm sort of trying to write how he sees, which he has fly vision. He sees the way a fly does or an insect. So if I see that way, if I see in mosaic, how does that affect my speech? I really think that how we see is going to somehow transfer into our tongue somehow. So he's fucked up in two ways. He has fly vision and his heart is on the right side. And he's trying to become a pilot, but he can't. So I'm gonna read you a scene where he goes to the military processing, entrance processing station, and then after that, he's all, messed up. So he goes to the shooting range to hang out with his friend, and they talk about their impediment. And this was published in Callaloo, the summer of 2007. Compound vision is a disqualifying condition for flying duty classes 11A, 22F, 2S3. I have compounded vision. Having the vision of a fly disqualifies me from flying. I asked this to the military entrance processing station people. They did not appreciate my ironness. MEPS people, they've got too much solder in their ears for the kinds of brags I gave them. I was disqualified from flying duty classes 11A, 22F, 2S3. Dextrocardia is a disqualifying condition for flying duty classes 11A, 22F, 2S3. I have it, dextrocardia. Having my heart beat on the right disqualifies me from patriotic duty? I asked this to the MEPS doctor when he stuck a stethoscope over my left nipple and just heard lung. He did not appreciate my deep passion fruit for combat. He just frowned at my beater on my right and at the brags I gave him. He took off his stethoscope. He said to forget about much even trying to scalp a medical waiver. It's especially hard to abstain for aviation duty. The bastard disqualified me from flying duty classes 11A, 22F, 2S3. Pistola was already shooting him up at the gallery. What taking me so long? How'd it go at the MEPS, he said. Oh, tough as Kuntao tough, I yelled over his bullet marks. Too bad, he yelled. He pumped more lead onto paper. Too bad indeed. Pistola understood me. A bum eye had disqualified him for army duty. I watched him Swiss cheese another paper man. He was the better shot. To me, bull's eye looked like chessing boards. I shot anyway how. Stop shooting to the right, Guerrero. The hearts are on the left, he said. I stopped shooting altogether now. It was easier to watch Pistola kill off a nation-state of paper men. He was getting yawn bored with paper. I was too. In fact, running out of bullet points meant I was plenty thirsty. Time to shoot the breeze piss, I told him. We went to the Athena pub next to the door of the gallery. Beers there were cheap and warm, but Pistola liked the gun decorum there. He leaned, oh hush. Ronnie Velasquez can forge us med waivers. That shook up stuff in my mind box. Tricky for air duty, I said. I don't know about that. That shook up stuff in Pistola's mind box. It'll be easier for you. You're a secret cripple. No one can see your busted heart and vision, and if you just shut up, they won't hear you spit those sixers either. My cripple, now that's a different story. Never any pity in the brags about his bum eye. Pistola drank good and plenty to keep me from saying anything much. So anyway, Ronnie's on leave and has connects, he said. He's a good guy. I've got love for him. It's quite possible that Pistola may fester love for people. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So our final respondent I'm going to introduce today is Scott Heath, an assistant professor in the Department of English at Georgia State. His book, Head Theory, Hip-Hop Discourse and Black-Based Culture, under contract with Oxford, explicates the ways in which our arguments about hip-hop text have shifted in the last decade, concurrent with recent developments in the technologies of race. Heath guest edited Callaloo's widely acclaimed special issue on hip-hop music and culture. He has since reimagined the project as Texan Burners, Studies in Contemporary Hip-Hop Design, a collection of essays to be included in Charles Rawls' Callaloo's Diaspora series at Johns Hopkins University Press. Professor Heath's gonna transition us into some Q&A action.
All right.
Thank you.
Did you say enliven or add color to earlier?
Enliven.
Enliven, okay. Let me try to enliven. I've just been taking a few notes, a few remarks. How are you guys doing so far? Maybe I'll bring us back a bit to the conference theme here. I've just been thinking about love and thinking that love in a diasporic context seems to me is always a speculative venture. It's always about measuring possibility, right? Making all of us sort of investment speculators ourselves, we're asking where or where not to deposit this emotional and psychic energy. The speculative text, whether it's fictive or not, seems to be largely occupied with questions around spatiality and temporality, space travel, time travel, movement of some sort. This movement often with the insertion or the insistence of newer technologies, if we're talking about certain literature or certain film and things, is a movement toward or against or beyond particular perimeters, right? Particular borders, if you will. And it seems to be about, those borders seem to be about delineating the possible and the impossible. So how does this apply to a proposed love project? It seems that with a lot of speculative text and with a lot of love projects, what we find embedded in the text is a certain type of planned obsolescence is what I call an expected end to the thing. In a lot of cases, we see this through a cynical lens. In a lot of sort of earlier speculative work, we see it as an anticipation of I was thinking the other day about the year 2000. Prince has a song, 1999, that he did in the 80s, right? Where he's talking about partying like it's 1999, anticipating the turn of the millennium. I was thinking about the excited denizens of Oakland in Sun Ra's Space is the Place, who were also anticipating the year 2000, right? And you have Sun Ra reminding us that it's after the end of the world, you know? Don't you know that yet? He also says we work on the other side of time, right? So he's anticipating the end as well. And then in our lives, right? You remember the Y2K scare. You know, we're anticipating the year 2000, anticipating the end. You know, everything's going to crash, and here we are still, you know, getting along. So I think there's been a sort of post-millennial shift too, because we have passed the year 2000, and I think the next thing was 2012 that we were supposed to be afraid of, and here we are so far. There is a sort of danger in the air, and Greg referenced Toni Morrison. I was recently teaching Morrison's Beloved, where there are conversations about love, and Seth and Paul D talk about the danger of love, and how one is taught or at least encouraged to love just a little bit, because we're so used to the loss, you know, that maybe if we love just a little bit, it won't hurt so much when the ending comes. So along with our interest in futurism, I think when it comes to Black speculative work, we're also greatly occupied with memory, sometimes with the trauma of memory even. So the text, you know, when we do work like Greg's or like Nettie's, becomes a revisionist exercise in it to a certain extent, especially when it's about love, with regard to a Black love narrative. You know, here's the love. You know, I have love for you, dog. I hate that phrase. I have love for you, because I always think, why don't you give it to me if you have it? Just give it. You have love for me, and it's weird. There's a certain there's a hesitancy there, right? I have love for you. I don't want to say I love you. I have love for you, and maybe I will share a bit at a time. You know, there's a fear factor, right? I think it's a fear factor. Besides our just general fear of expressing intimacy, this masculinist thing. I'll come back to that. So here's the love. You know, and the question becomes, okay, how do we protract that thing, right? How do we extend it? How do we make it visible across time and across space? You know, that's what the speculative project is about when it comes to Black love. How do we stretch it out instead of losing access to her mind and her music? Is that how it meant? Instead of losing access, how do we access it and maintain it? How do we access what I call the new intimacy formats, right? Formats in which we allow ourselves to be expectant, right? I think that's what a lot of this works about, utilizing the newer platforms. I hear that in Nettie's work. I hear that in Greg's work, and I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. We did start a little bit late, so I'm gonna allow 10 minutes over for Q&A or just feelings, responses. We're gonna go ahead and open it up to the audience. Yes.
I was really kind of struck by the text as I was how you combine those both historic, taking historic text and setting it in a speculative, also futuristic.
Well, actually, that particular speech by King was brought to my attention by filmmaker Colleen Smith, and she has a manifesto where she argues for, inspired by that speech, an association for the advancement of creatively maladjusted cinema, and we were both struck by the echo with the organization that was started in Chicago in the 60s, the AACM. And she's actually been doing a lot of work in Chicago, and she found that none of the members of the AACM were actually aware of the fact that this acronym that they created, had been preceded by King's speech. And so when this piece was performed first at a series Jason and Alicia Hall Moran curated at the Whitney Museum called Bleed. And Jason actually played music by Muhal Richard Abrams, who founded the ACM, and by Roscoe Mitchell, another founding member. And that piece, the piece by Muhal is actually a piece with vocals called How Are You? And that broaches on those ideas that are also found in Bob Marley's "Could You Be Loved," and in the amazing beginning of Tony K. Bambara's novels, novel "The Salt Eaters," which "Are You Sure You Want to Be Well?" And I was interested in that what people looked at as the unbridgeable divide between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King over this question of violence, as a solution to oppression, as a strategy for oppression. And I was interested in imagining the ways in which, in practice and in dialogue in their movements, that if they had both lived beyond the times of their demise and actually were able to engage in these conversations, how some synthesis might emerge in the conversation as they confronted actual conditions. So there's places in there where I allow for this slippage, where Malia is supposed to be Malcolm, Martine is supposed to be Martin, but there's places where I actually substitute the voice of one for the other. And that was really influenced by something King said after he had taken his family to spend a few weeks in the projects in Chicago. And he said that if I had started my movement in the North instead of the South, like even I would have had to reconsider nonviolence as a strategy, which really spoke to the notion that what is the greater violence, the destruction of the body or the destruction of the, oppression of the psyche. And as well, one of the things that I found when I started working with the actors who worked on this piece in the production was that there was no way to get around the kind of embedded masculinity, kind of heroic black male masculinity of their voices if it was actually read as speech. So we actually, and with Jason, of course, being lyrical and mellifluous behind us, moved into this kind of Sondheim sung speech place that actually allowed them to really own the language and the intention of the language, and also to create their own kind of particular tension in friendship through sound. So as opposed to them being in opposition in ideas, they were actually creating this dialectic in music, in musicality, And so, yeah, I mean, you know, and the piece was really conceived with the idea that the music itself was the bridge and the connection that preachers, that different notion of a preacher's voice that they both had. And then also, one of the things, you know, when you actually look at both of their words transcribed to the page, you know, you're just struck by our incredible fortune to have two figures who were thinking that deeply and that committedly, not only about politics and strategy, but then about the notion that language is a transactional medium, as highly Jarima reminded us yesterday for this whole notion of love and a revolutionary love. So.
Yes.
Yeah. I would just add to that, you know, of course, it's also about the relational consequences of how we act in the moment, you know, and what our sense of responsibility or irresponsibility creates in those kind of fragile, tenuous, dangerous moments, emotional moments.
Any other panelists want to respond? Regine, you had a hand up.
Thank you so much, Jade, for the panels. I guess I don't know if this Nene, with your piece, you actually brought up something that's been kind of absent in this conference, which is oddly what was the theme of our conference last year, is the question of translation, love and translation. And, you know, with the word bifunyanya, this idea that, you know, love is something that cannot be translated across in different languages and cultures, but also as that which is really infinitely translatable. You know, the look of your father, or on the first night, one of the dancers was saying that we had a dance performance on the first night, and one of the dancers in the company said, you know, I only speak English, but I really can speak any language in the world because I can, with a movement, someone can understand exactly what it is that I'm saying no matter where I go. So I guess I would love to hear, and then I'm also reminded of the conversation we had last night, where there's this, in Amharic, there's a way that you, like a syllable that you add to the end of someone's name, which expresses endearment. And Dag was saying to me, so whenever I call him, he says, oh, to respond to you appropriately, to recognize that kind of love, you have to, in your, what is that called? In the way that you address the person, the pronoun that you use to address the person, the you add on this. Am I describing it correctly? Right. So, you know, for myself, you know, I think about the differences. For example, in Creole, we have this program which has all the words on it. In Creole, you know, when you say leme is also a way for me to say, oh, I love you so much, but then also leme itself also refers to having sex, right? And it can be, you know, a type of, you know, sex that is with absence of love as well. And then in the French, obviously, we have, you know, my sister Richards, who was giving us these, and Sharon with l'amour fou. In French, you find that a lot of times, amour, there are all these different words, amour propre, self-love, amour fou, crazy, there are all these different adjectives that people attach to the word love. So I was just wondering if, you know, some of you could just reflect on this idea about love and translation, whether it's translation in a kind of literal sense, right, culturally, linguistically, or in you know, different, or as it's informed by various, you know, ideologies.
That's a lot. I think that, well, as you were talking, I was thinking about the idea of translation, and then also when in television and culture. For example, well, within Nigerian culture, you have certain ideas of love, and I think that love is, I think the definition of love varies depending on the culture, definitely, and it varies depending on the words that they use. For example, like I was saying, in Igbo culture, there is no direct translation of the idea of falling in love. There's no word for that. But I think the ideas of, I don't know how to describe this, it's very hard to explain. The younger generation knows that idea now, you know, whereas before, that because there was no direct translation of falling in love, it didn't exist. Like that idea of two people coming together, they fall in love and they get married, it didn't exist until Western culture came. And so now the younger generation has that idea of falling in love, but it's something that is in English. It's something, the words are in English. So I think that when something doesn't exist, I don't know, when something doesn't exist within the culture, there needs to be a word for it in order for that concept to exist. And I think that makes the idea of love very complicated. And I think that with our shrinking world, and with not social networking, but what am I thinking? With technology and people being brought together more with social networking, with the internet, et cetera, I think these ideas are going to change. I think that the idea of love is going to shift, and I think that it's not going to rely solely on words within one language. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And so this whole idea that there are many concepts, many different concepts that are not translatable within each culture. But since we're talking about love, we'll stick with that. So this idea that each culture has its own concept of love, that's through their words. I think that's definitely going to change with the future. And I think that that's going to be due to language becoming something else. Because, for example, when people are speaking online, it's not always, there are ideas that are passed between people that are not within that language. For example, emoticons. I'm thinking of emoticons. You have the smiley face, and that means a lot, and it's all within imagery. So, and the emoticon is something that is understood worldwide. You know, people see that and they understand it instantly. So that's something where language is not obsolete, but there's a translatable language across the board. So how will that affect, you know, just the idea of love, for example? I think that the future will be different. I don't think everything is going to rely directly on what can be translated and what can't be translated. If that makes sense. No, not across the board, but I think that language does define what we know. That language, like, not across the board, but sometimes yes. A lot of times, yes. Yeah.
I think that where it becomes tricky, so I guess this is in a little bit of a different context, but I do a lot of work on anti-violence work, right, sexual violence. And we had this conference in New York for students, and we talked about consent, the idea of consent and the way that the anti-rape movement is now being built around the notion of consent. And a lot of the students that we were working with, they really took us to task for it because they were talking about how, for example, if you think about students with disabilities, right, because we talk about consent as being verbal, right? So, you know, how do you know whether or not someone is consenting when you're, and the students were saying, well, what about, you know, they're really telling us, like, what do you do with students with disabilities? What if you can't express that, right? And so I think similarly, you know, to your point, that if it's to say, if you don't have the like literal physical word to say love, that doesn't mean that you haven't been able to experience, which I think is what you're getting at.
That is precisely what I'm saying. Otherwise, there is no tension. We are not, whether it be in the areas of, say, social justice, or areas of affect, or areas of taste, we've all been told that, you know, that we have, and we have new experiences. And new experiences, new forms of expression, or new forms of symbolic expression, like emoticons, for instance. These are symbolic forms of expression that are taken along of their own, that then can give expression to things that are to us. We can say, we did not have words for it. Right, but the idea that
I wanted to maybe repeat something that Jarima said yesterday about unannounced love and the Western concept of always having to announce love, and how he buries atomically that love in his work and the characters. And for me, that the issue of atomic was an interesting choice, because I think for me the translation regime would be movement. I think that movement of energies, of bodies, of, you know, anything static, I think, does not share, does not emit, does not. So translation for me, I keep going back to the anatomy because Calle 13 has a song that says, it's called Muévete, and it's actually with Fela Kuti's son. He does a collaboration. It's a beautiful song, but it's all about movement. Move. If you can't move your body, move your ideas. And the whole song, I mean, it's like really good to work out to. But so when you move, you cannot be inactive. You cannot not do. And so that would be for me the place. It's just the idea of motion. You know, if it's a idea of physics, it's the idea, it's what light is, it's you know, high vibrations, but constantly being engaged physically in matter in that respect. So that's the translation for me. And sometimes words can express what I think words get in the way. You know, we send each other too many damn telegrams, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. This is our last question, gentlemen. I know, I was like, aren't you supposed to be done here?
Yeah. Like, what do you mean by that?
Both of them are forms of fiction. We're actually moving somewhere else. I mean, the practices that y'all gave us today just brought to bear this idea that, look, I mean, we're all imagining. I mean, experiment, whether it be in whatever register, and that what's happening is we're still trying to think identity, and y'all are forcing us to think beyond an identitarian logic. And in many ways, we're still trying to figure out what it is that you're doing, but you're doing something else, even with the materials that we think we already know. I mean, I'm wondering if in the 16 dialects that we've been working on a Igbo translation project with Professor Chedek. He's dedicated the rest of everything he's doing to think. I'm wondering if that inability is not it's not because we're looking for an identity. I mean, it's the inability to understand it because we're looking for this identitarian core. We're looking for this straight equal relationship. And it's actually refusing that sort of thought. It's refusing that line of thinking. Bringing together Kenyan acts and the ways in which you did forces us to begin to think that, look, these debates are always already with us. When Morrison does it in Song of Solomon with Guitar Milkman and the 7 days, that was a question of mine. I mean, there's always these questions, but how do we begin to think them not as these exact statics that give us either these exact opposites that we can then frame around and then think around categorically, but actually begin to break that categorical identitarian logic. And it seems to me that the only way we're able to do that is with what you're doing here. And even with flattening love to the Western
Yes, that's
concept,
what
we're talking about love in English.
Right.
And you know what? There are many ways to understand love in English, but we have to understand the context in which this language is being used, but we want to flatten it. We want to say, once we have the category, the category got stuck, got us by the throat, and it's clogging up our thinking, and we're trying to break it. And I just want to ask, what's the process in which you're doing it? I mean, I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to, one, yes, when I'm talking about love, I'm talking about the Western idea. And there are many, of course, there are many different definitions. So when I say that there is no concept of love, or there's no direct translation of love in the Igbo language, I'm talking about the Western idea of love. That's what I want to specify at that. And then also with the category of science fiction, that's something I've been battling against throughout my whole writing career. One of the Who Fears Death is categorized in different places as something else. You know, some say it's science fiction, some say it's fantasy. I say I don't care. I'm not really concerned with categories. I'm concerned with the ideas. I'm concerned with what I'm saying on the inside. If you look at the category of fantasy, for example, I'm drawing off of Igbo folklore and mythology and culture and spiritual beliefs. There are people in Igbo land who believe in a lot of the things that are considered just magic in my work. So does that make what I'm doing fantasy? Or, because fantasy is just, stuff that you've made up and it's not real, or is that something else? So this whole idea of categories is something that I rail against, but at the same time, it's a way of describing something. It's simplifying, and I think we should all be fully aware of that. I think there is a category of science fiction, but once you hold a magnifying glass up to it, the borders kind of fall apart. And quite frankly, I wouldn't really worry about that. I'd be worried more about, I'm more interested in what these things are doing. Because once you start talking about categories at all, you're either talking about what publishers use in order to sell books and how they sell them and all of that, or, and once you start doing that, then you start kind of boxing things in and overtly simplifying things, and once something is categorized as one thing, then you don't see all the other things that it is. So, yeah, categories, I think, are better just used by publishers and marketing tools, or if you just need to give an idea of what you're talking about, then I think that's the best way to use them.
We've got to stop. We've got to stop. Please feel free to come down and approach the panelists directly. I have a very important announcement to make. Right here at 5:00 p.m. tonight, a very stellar lineup of amazing writers, in addition to the closing statements and final remarks. Please come. Seems like it will be a very festive occasion. Thank you. Last round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Thanks also to Corey Walker, our satellite part of our respondent panel. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.